Hi, my name is Alyssa, and today we're making the Tabantha Bake inspired by Age of Calamity.
What's a Tabantha?
Stop asking. Tabantha Bake is described as mushrooms wrapped in dough. So what we have is mushrooms and pine nuts and onions and all kinds of things that are good and delicious, wrapped in a very fluffy type of white bread. What you get is this beautiful little loaf that when you cut it open, it looks like the picture. These are the ingredients that you'll need. 600 grams of bread flour, 2 tablespoons of sugar, 2 1/4 teaspoons or 1 packet of instant yeast, 2 1/2 teaspoons of table salt, 1 2/3 cup of water, 110 degrees Fahrenheit. For the filling, you'll need, I don't have measurements for this.
Just go, this is what you'll need, eyeball it.
1/2 cup of Baby Portabella Mushrooms, a teaspoon of sage, 1/4 cup of pine nuts, black pepper and salt to taste, a teaspoon of olive oil, a teaspoon of minced garlic, and 2 tablespoons of chives.
Your eyebrows look concerned.
You'll also need 1 egg, a teaspoon of water, and a pinch of salt. The basic bread method that you're gonna go with is you're gonna take your flour and you're gonna make a bowl in your flour for your sugar, yeast, and water. You're gonna make sure it's warm enough. You don't want it to be too hot because you're gonna overbake your yeast. If you do that, your yeast is gonna die. It's gonna be no good. You don't want it too cold, otherwise your yeast isn't gonna grow. You want it to be about 110 degrees. Now, if you don't have a thermometer, then that's okay. If you're not used to it, then use a thermometer. If you don't have one, just feel for it. You'll get used to it. So you have your water, it's warm. You can feel it, so it's like bath water, basically. You're gonna pour it into the little bowl that you created with your flour and your yeast. Pour half of your water. Now you need your sugar. So you need to feed the yeast. It'll start to get kind of foamy and bubbly. So let it set, give it a couple minutes. When it starts smelling yeasty and starts looking all foamy and gross, then you know you're good to start mixing. You can add the rest of your water.
What are you doing?
I'm watching the yeast eat. It's not that fascinating, but I think it's fascinating. Watching all the little bubbles form. It's science. So when you're using a stand mixer, you don't want to really go above where it says stir. If you're really impatient and you're going to break the rules and go higher anyway, definitely don't go above 2. But ideally, you shouldn't go above stir. So you're just scraping the sides of your bowl because you want to make sure all of the flour is in the dough as you're mixing it. So do it as needed. You also want to watch out for the bottom. There's going to be some flour that gets caught right in here. So just as you're mixing, just be aware because there can be extra stuff that gets stuck. All right, I'm going to add some salt. You don't want to add it early. If you add it early, you'll kill your yeast. Especially don't put your salt on top of your yeast. When you're putting your sugar and your water and your yeast together, salt does not go in that mix. You will kill it. Do it later. I like doing it around this step. It's a good step because it's mostly formed. You know it's not going to fall apart. Then you're going to spray a large bowl with non-stick. Put your dough inside, let it rest in an 80-degree area for 1 to 2 hours. What I've done here is I've kind of made a proofing box. So ideally you want to have your dough to proof in a container that's 80 degrees. So what you can do is you can heat up a cup of water, or you can boil some water and stick it in your oven. Or if you have a small enough space, you can put it in the microwave. Just be sure that you don't turn your microwave on. As soon as your timer's up, check on it, make sure it's doubled in size. Once it's doubled in size, then you know you're ready to go and you can move on to the next step. While it's rising, prepare your filling. I'm making the filling for the Tabantha Bake. So I have some olive oil in the pan. I'm gonna add some mushrooms that I just cut up. Have a 1/4 cup of pine nuts. I love garlic. You're gonna saute them in a pan lightly until the mushrooms shrink down and the pine nuts are toasted. And then you're gonna set that aside. When your dough is done proofing, gently deflate the dough. Oh, it's the most satisfying thing in the world. And divide it in half on a floured surface. Stretch the dough into even rectangles. Then you're gonna evenly spread the filling onto each rectangle So the game describes the dish as mushrooms wrapped in dough. I took that as kind of like swirl bread, as you would see like cinnamon raisin bread. The dough kind of wraps around itself. That's kind of the interpretation I'm taking on it. So I'm making sure that these are all spread out. You don't want to have a clump of anything. Having a thin layer makes it fluffier, and you'll have a better looking, better tasting, and a better texture to your bread. And this is the part where we roll it up. It's the most important and the fun part. Rolling gently with your fingers, so your fingers are very loose. You're gonna tuck in the bottom, and it'll look like a little potato. And you're gonna do the same thing again. Place on a parchment-lined tray, covered with grease, wrap, and just lightly rest it for 45 minutes. While this is resting, preheat your oven 450 degrees Fahrenheit. Depending on what you're baking, you may or may not want to cut slots in your bread. We did not cut slots in the bread because we wanted it to look like the picture. If you want your bread to rise more, cut slots in the top. It will become fluffier. That part's up to you. After it's done with the second proof, you're going to brush it with egg wash. It's going to make the outside really shiny, because if you look at the picture in the game, it's like really shiny. That's exactly what we want. Then you're going to bake it for 18 to 22 minutes. The inside temperature of your bread should be 190 degrees Fahrenheit. So if you have a thermometer, check the temperature of your bread and make sure it has reached temperature so the inside of your bread is not raw. Let your bread rest for 10 minutes before cutting into it. I know you want to cut it open. I know it's exciting, but you have to let it rest. If you like this recipe, be sure to check out Legends Cookbook Hero of the Ladle, now on Kickstarter. It's a brand new project and we'll be making tons of cool things. We're gonna have a digital cookbook and it'll have this recipe and many more. We'll also have all kinds of custom things like ladles, aprons, pins, and more. Thanks for cooking with us. Comment below and let us know if there's anything else that you would like to see us make. Have a great day. Bye-bye.
You ripped off my door handle.
Why did your door break? Oh my god.